can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So, with mine, I had to cover loops, conditional statements, functions, variables, parameters, arrays, and associative arrays. So what I've done is I've got 3 programs that I'm going to go through, and I've got them open in Chrome, just so I can just kind of talk about them and stuff and whatnot. So yeah, tell me if I'm going too fast. I'm going to try and I'm sure you guys probably know a lot of what I'm going over, but you know, we have to go over it. So anyway, loops is first. As you can hear, I still have bronchitis, so I apologize. But so with the powers of I have a function here which raises 2 to the power of whatever you put in the field, and I have a loop function or a while loop for until that is fulfilled. So let me just run the program real quick. This is my program. So 2 to the power of 14 gives us 384. So how that works is the HTML is what is 2 to the power of, and then there's an input field and a button, which when you press it, it runs this JavaScript. So the JavaScript is running in a function. I'll go over those further down. And I start off with when the calculation is 0, so that we start with 0 and I is 0. And so T1 is my input, and so that's like the maximum of the loop. So while T1 is greater than 0, if T1 is greater than 0, so to make sure the actual input was greater than 0, so while I, which is our increment number, is less than or equal to the number that we put in, perform a calculation, and then perform the output. And it'll continue to do that until the I is greater than or equal to, or is equal to, I guess, T1. So that's loops, I guess. Does that make sense? Am I going too fast? Am I doing this right?
Well, that's good.
Okay, cool. So conditional statements are statements, as you probably guessed, that run based on a condition. And there are different types of conditions. Like the first one you've seen here is, this is a condition where if my input is greater than 0, run the function. But you can also do if-else functions where, in this case, this is a different program. If a certain function or a variable equals ends, perform this, else if the variable equals this, run this. And you can do different kinds of if statements, or if or else. And basically, it's just a checking for a certain thing. Functions. You can run many functions within a single JavaScript. As you can see in this one, I've got 4 different functions. And they can be run from within within one script, as you can see right here. No, main press. Where is it? So my main button presses. Where is it? Button. Okay, click main, and so that does my one program. This runs another program. So the main program. Okay, there we go. Yep. It's been a while since I've written this. Here we are. Yeah. So right here you've got this is running this function. So this variable produces the result of that function. So that function is there, and that becomes that variable. And the same is true here, and things like that. So you can run functions which are basically chunks of JavaScript which can be run independent of each other, but also together. And yeah, I'm not very good at teaching JavaScript, so I apologize if I'm going wrong on this. But so do you understand what functions are?
Mhm.
All right, cool. So I've got a bunch of variables, and variables are basically values or parameters or things that you use to run your functions. So in this case, this one is variable list, which is one of my inputs, this input here. And so that's that value, and then I replace it to find values of an array. Basically this function, actually let me show you what this function does so it makes more sense. This function here, I can put in a series of numbers, so 1, 5, 2, 12, 6, I don't know, 2. So then what that will do is it'll find, and I've got it setting two different functions here. The first one is to add first and last, so do 1 plus 2, which will give us 3, and find the middle value, which should be 2 or 12. So it's the average of the two of those two, if there's more than one middle. So, yeah. And I've got a reset button, obviously, as well. But, so the list function is that field right there, where you can list a bunch of things. So just, that's my list field. Anyway, yep, so, so variables. Parameters, those are these here. As you can see, I've got run this function with the parameter of press. And what that means is I can run the same function with different outputs. Like this is a good example of that, where I've got, here's my function, and this one's running that function with the parameter of ends, and this one's running the function with the parameter of mid. These are two different buttons, and they're running the exact same function, but with two different parameters. And parameters are useful so you can run the same program for two different functions without having to write two different pieces of code. And it's useful because, like, for example here, add ends list, that's a parameter, which it pulls from here. So the parameter is that variable, which it pulls into this function, and then runs it to return an answer. So, yeah, that's what parameters are. And arrays, we're actually looking at what arrays are. Arrays are, and I'm going to go into a lot more detail into associative arrays, but arrays are basically a series of values in a variable. So, like, for example, let's go to this one. This is where I'm going to do arrays and associative arrays. So I've made up a little basic program for this where a regular array could be cars, where cars has values of Ford, Falcon, 2010, and 80,000. Those are 4 values in an array. So if I need to access the first value, it would be cars 1. No, sorry, cars 0 would be Ford, cars 1 would be Falcon, cars 2, 2010, cars 3, 80,000. Now, this is where JavaScript differs from other languages a bit more, I guess, is that in JavaScript they make it's a lot more object-based, and you can do object attributes. So, and those are called, another way of saying there's associative arrays, where here's the same variable, not grayed out obviously, where variable cars make, so you've given it an actual value here, make of t1, which is one of my variables, so but ends up being whatever I put into it. So the first value is t1. Could have done the same thing here, but I can reference it, see, with these. So if I was to say cars.make, I would be referencing this value. If I was to say cars.year, it would be referencing this value, and things like that. So you can do different things, and it's a good way to reference things and know exactly what you're looking for. So, like, let's say I had a array for contact information, and then I wanted to, rather than just have a series of, let me just write one out real quick. Let's say I haven't got it before, so variable cars could be Ford, Falcon. Then years don't have to be in brackets or in quotations, and then 80,000. Those are 4 different values. But I could also, as we said with the associative arrays, make it make of Ford. So now whenever I type in cars.make, it'll be Ford. Assuming this is grayed out, obviously. Whenever I do model of Falcon year 2010 and mileage, and obviously it's case sensitive, so if I was to write my mileage as lowercase, it would not find it. So that's something very important to remember, is that yeah, it has to be case sensitive. So in this case, I'm going to disable this, And as you can see, my mileage here is 80,000, which is lower than 100,000. So I'm going to come out with this in output here. So if I was to run this function, so let me save it. So I currently don't have to enter any of these because I've gone without, so I'm still all good because these are my values. But if I was to do it this way, let's do, those ones don't matter I guess as much, but 200,000 vehicle assessment, you might want to start saving up for a new car because that value was higher than 100,000. So yeah, that's all of those things. Did I go too fast?
No, that sounds good, and that actually makes more sense
Cool.
with mine now. Because I have objects, and I wasn't sure where exactly you would use those, but in an array, that makes more sense. How you would include them.
How about you over there, Julia?
Oh, for me it was perfect. I think it's a good presentation. Good. Actually, you put it in practice. I don't know. For me, it was clear. It wasn't fast. It was perfect.
All right, cool. I mean, JavaScript's not really that complicated, really. So I didn't think it needed to be overly complicated.
Well, I don't have as much like working code as you, so I hope, because I've never written an object before, so hopefully mine makes sense. But let's see.
I'll put links to these as GitHub files, I guess, in the discussion board thing, so that if you guys need to look at these later on, you can do that. So, yeah.
Cool. I'll do the same.
Awesome.
I'm not sure how do you, I'm not, are you familiar how to upload stuff to GitHub? Is it pretty self-explanatory when you get in there, or is it kind of...
Honestly, I've never tried it. I'm going to mess around with it and try.
Me either. Okay.
But yeah, so these all work, and yeah. Anyway, so I'm going to turn off screen sharing, and you can have it now.
Cool. Okay, so I had objects.
Excuse me.
So first of all, some definitions. So pretty much everything in Java is an object. Booleans, numbers, and strings can be, and pretty much everything else always is. I have them listed there, but that pretty much encompasses everything else. Primitives are not objects, and there are 5 primitive data types, which is string, number, Boolean, null, and unidentified. And that was contradicting to what it said before, because it said strings, I guess they only can be, but if they're primitive, I guess they aren't. Objects are also variables, and then they're mutable. So calling variable of x equals person won't create a copy. It just is calling the person. It is the person. So any changes to that variable x will also change the person, like if person has a value associated to it or whatever. So objects are basically just named values. So properties can usually be changed, added, and deleted, but some are read-only. The syntax is this line of code right here. So you can either do the object name dot property, which would be person.age, for example, or you can write it in parentheses with the brackets if it's a string, or you can just use the expression. So an example would be person.firstname plus is plus the person's age plus years old would be a property. And then there's a delete keyword that lets you delete a property from an object. And that would be like if you had called variable person and had this object listed, then you on the next line would do delete person.age, and then it would delete it. And then in loops, you have to have like a for statement. So for variable in the object as the parameter, code to be executed. So example would be var person with these variables, and then for x in person, and then text plus, I don't know what the plus equal person is. That's just the example that I got online.
Plus equals, usually you can add a value to an existing value. So like if you have, let's say, x plus equals 1, then the value of x will gain 1 each time you do that. So
Oh,
you're adding that value to person x as a position. So you're putting text in the position of x every time.
okay.
So
Thank you.
it's a good way of like filling an array. So like if you had 10 values in an array and you needed to fill them with whatever txt was, then you would fill them in that place. Anyway, sorry, you go on.
No, that's helpful because I didn't remember what that symbol meant. So then there's methods in objects, and those are just the actions that can be performed within an object. They always include a function definition. In JavaScript, the value of this when used in a function is the object that owns the function. So the syntax for that is the object name dot method name and then the parentheses for the function. So the example that they had was name equals person dot full name, and then they finish the function with the parentheses. And then to add a new method to an object, it's written like this: person.name equals function, return this dot first name, plus whatever, and then plus this dot last name. Constructors and objects. Let me try to concise this down. So the easiest way to construct an object is to create a single object. And that's when you both define and create an object in one statement. So this is kind of what you were showing in your array. So the var person equals, you have the first name of John, the last name of Doe, age of 50, and eye color of blue. And then you can define and create a single object with the keyword new, but that's not necessary. They actually suggest you just do the shortened version like this. So here's an example. They have it written in a function. So the function of person, parameters of first, last, age, and eye. Then they have these objects within the function. Sometimes we need a blueprint for creating many objects of the same type. The way to create an object type is to use an object constructor function. In the example above, function person is an object construction function. Objects of the same type are created by calling the constructor function with the new keyword. So if you had this function, you would have to add these variables with the keyword of new to make them the same type of object. Otherwise, they'll just be single objects like the one up here. And then in order to add a new property to an object, you have pretty much the same format except for they add this dot nationality is English. So you pretty much just add it in the same function, but then you would call it the same way with the new keyword as a new variable. Okay. There are some built-in constructors in Java, which this is just the syntax. And then they give you some examples of like how to shorthand right down here. So it says, I don't know, it's kind of confusing. It said JavaScript has object versions of the primitive data types string, number, and Boolean, but there is no reason to create complex objects. Primitive values are much faster. And then it gives examples of those down here for reference. And those are just built in to Java. Okay, and then prototypes. JavaScript objects inherit properties and methods from a prototype. So it really just depends on what you're creating. The date.prototype, or an array, you would use array.prototype. Basically whatever you're naming the object. And then the object.prototype is on the top of the prototype inheritance chain. Date, array, and person objects inherit from the object.prototype. The prototype property also allows you to add new methods in the object constructors. So you have that same function with the same parameters, and then below it you would add with the person prototype dot name, and then you would put it equal to the function of return the syntax for adding the new method right below. So the function includes the syntax of a new method. And then you can also add new properties. And that's the same thing. You would do the same function, and then you would use the person prototype again below it. That one's a little bit simpler than, you don't have to call, or you don't have to set it equal to the function like you do with the method, but you have to declare it after the function. So I've never written an object, so maybe some of that was confusing. I didn't understand all of it, but have either of you written an object that want to share?
I mean, most of JavaScript works off of functions and such, so off of objects. I mean, JavaScript's made to be around a object-oriented thing, so yeah. Ultimately, I think you just kind of...
So the code that you showed us could basically be considered an object, right?
When I was talking about like the cars, where you had a car, vehicle make, model, and stuff like that, that was an object. So
right.
I'll go back to my screen real quick, just so that kind of helps. All right, so back over here, yeah, this was an object. So when I said cars.mileage, cars was the object, and it was calling for an attribute. I think that's right. It's either mileage is the object. I'm pretty sure it's cars is the object, and mileage is the attribute of that object.
I think that's, yeah.
So you can access
You're completely
those,
right.
you can access those attributes of those objects by doing like object.attribute, like as you were saying in yours. So this is, I guess, the practical use of what you were saying, where my variable of cars has multiple attributes of make, model, year, mileage, and whatever else we can think of, color.
Okay. Right. Yeah, that makes sense. That's why it was like making more sense after I had seen you present, because I was like, oh, that's what mine was talking about.
Yeah.
At least in the array sense.
Yep.
What would like the person objects look like?
It'd be exactly the same. So it'd be like var person equals, oh my gosh, I can't type.
So they're just all written the same way.
Yeah, I mean, you can write them. There's a number of ways you can write them. There's no wrong way to write them, but this is the way I found the simplest. So like, first name equals, and then maybe a variable. So var1, last name equals var2 or whatever, so on and so forth. So if you needed to access the person's first or last name, you could go person dot first name. Obviously, actually in JavaScript, it's good practice to go lowercase for the first word and uppercase for the second word. Just it makes it easier to, like when you're writing and stuff, to always keep it the same. So first name equals whatever.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can call on them the same way. So object dot attribute, and then equals whatever.
Okay.
So anyway.
So I was right in the fact that an object's not really something specific like an array or a function. It's just, it includes all of those things.
Correct.
Okay. Cool.
Any
Well,
comments,
hopefully you get
Julia?
some textbook information.
No, it actually was very complimentary. Both of these lessons, guys. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed all of them.
No worries.
Yeah,
Goodness for
thank
WP.
you.
That helps me a lot. It's a good resource.
Yeah, um, yeah. I don't know. This is gonna be more complimentary every time. So I was thinking on the next classes. Yeah, we will be need to be complementing to each other
Uh-huh.
on these cases.
Mhm.
But yeah, a lot of questions are coming up. It's nothing I can say. But other than that, for me was clear.
Mhm. I mean, I think it started
No
you
more
in the basics, but JavaScript's real simple, and I think we all have a basic, at least, understanding of JavaScript. So it'll get more complicated as we go.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yep.
Because
Yep.
this does at least like a review of
Excuse me.
all the basics I know. I don't know much more than functions and arrays, so
Okay, well, I'll put my codes up if you want to review those and kind of, I don't know, familiarize yourself.
yeah. And then what did you guys want? Do you guys want to just start creating our project as we go along, or should we teach a few more things first, or what's the plan for that?
How do we begin?
Well, the teachers sent actually know that we need to start working for that on week 9.
Okay.
So I think we have plenty of time. But if you guys wants to start working on the project, well, I'm down for it.
I'm happy to start whenever, but I'm not sure where to start. The programming language that the program will be built in is not one I'm familiar with, so that therein lies the problem.
Yeah. Well, first of all, to start, do you guys want to create a GitHub account,
I've got one of
share
those.
for the 3 of us,
Yeah.
Yeah.
where we can drop out everything?
Sorry. Once
Steve,
again,
you say you have one?
I do have one. I apologize once again for all my coughs. Can't
You
shake
don't
this
have
bronchitis. I just can't.
you don't have to apologize, man. If you have to do, you have to do it. Please don't stop for us.
So
Okay, yeah, I don't know.
now I'm not sure how to like create, the room for us to all drop our stuff in the same place. Are you familiar with that, Julio? How to set that up?
Yes, I did it a couple times. Actually, yeah, we didn't get to that point last week. I thought I promised I will do that, but let me. Have account, right? Do you have a share one or you have a personal one?
I have a personal one, but I'm not sure if that means it also can't share. I don't know.
Okay, let me create let's call it a room or a page where we can drop our stuff. I can send it to you by probably tonight, midnight,
Okay.
and
That's
start
great.
working on that.
Yeah.
And yeah, everybody just can go and drop whatever we have, and we can use it from there to teacher, and we can also use this account to create a project.
Now I have two questions. The first one, what do I do with the video that I'm currently recording? And for two, um, yeah, actually that's the first one. Number two, I'm also I do a lot of design work at work, so if we need any fancy graphics and all sorts, I think you said that Missy that you were also a graphic artist, but
Mhm.
yeah, I do a lot of advertising and stuff at work, so I do like banners and business cards and all sorts of stuff. So I think between at least the two of us, we could get something that looks fancy.
Yeah, for sure.
Good. I'm very bad at it, but I consider myself good at programming. I do a lot of programming every single day, so
That's cool.
I think this is a really good team.
Yeah. Um,
You know, where we could start with the project is even just looking up similar code. Like if we could find an example of code that's already written, like a passwords all-inclusive key type thing, we could just start looking at what it should look like or could look like and sharing some examples to the GitHub account so we can just know kind of where to start or how someone else has formatted it.
oh yeah, back to my earlier question. What do I do with the video that I'm recording?
I was reading about the video because I don't see a place where you can put the video on it. But when you have the meeting with the teacher, I'm guessing that you're gonna be using over there, but it's in a highlight that every single one of us we need the video when we're presenting.
Okay.
Also, I have it in YouTube, so if you want the link,
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't turn in any videos last week because I didn't see a spot to do so. So I don't know the answer to that question.
yeah, I think you don't have to worry because the videos we're gonna be presenting to the teacher is the one where we are teaching. So whenever we have our personal meetings with the teacher, we're gonna be presenting our videos like,
Okay. So
hey, this is my video.
when do we? I didn't know we had to physically meet with the teacher ourselves. When does that happen?
You have to create an appointment, I guess, with him. Let me check. I was reading this earlier. Let me just go over there.
All right. Well, since the lesson's done, I might end the recording because I mean we're just chit chatting at the moment.
Yeah, I was thinking of doing that too. But yeah.